Hi, my name is Ailian, or Lian for short, and today is July 17th. A month ago, it was June 17th, which also happened to be my birthday. Unfortunately, I didn't get to make a video at the time as I was finishing the academic year. But I'm here now, and I'm here to tell you a story. A story of the past roughly 9 years, through various outfits which resemble my style at various moments through those 9 years. So, without further ado, I present to you the arguably cringy teenage phases of the complete stranger on the internet. Chronology may not be completely accurate. Let's start at the age of 11, when I just started attending high school, or junior high, I guess, depending on where you live. I just finished primary school in any case. So, during my last year of primary school, I was introduced to the phenomenon called Avenged Sevenfold, and I was hooked. I guess you could say my emo phase hit quite early. So I mainly wore my sister's hand-me-downs, which I love to combine with bright-colored skinny jeans, which I fortunately do no longer have, so I just wear this instead, just to give you an idea. Times are good! I was blasting Hollywood Undead's music, completely unaware of what they were actually singing about, and if I had a caffeine addiction, I might as well have been a mini version of Abby from NCIS, because I was just so unbreakably happy, and so blissfully unaware of all the angst, the truly emo angst, that was yet to come. So, around the age of 12, I switched my style and adapted to the mainstream. I just wanted to fit in, be popular, live the high school dream. I wore leggings as a substitute for pants, even though it was December and freezing. I was obsessed with faux leather jackets and sneakers. But I quickly realized that this group of 13-year-old chain smokers and drug dealers I was hanging out with wasn't quite my posse, and it all just didn't quite feel right. Thus, I returned to a very long teenage self-discovery journey. And here's where the chronology gets really muddled, because I don't remember when everything exactly happened, but it definitely happened. I remember that. So, alright, let's just give it our best shot. Okay, so, I had a grunge phase, which was not really a single phase, but more so a recurring phase, kind of like a flu. It just appeared every once in a while. And just like a flu, I remember that every time it did come back, it was just slightly different. Like, there was early grunge me, and then at some point there was tattoo choker grunge me, and I'm pretty sure there were other adaptations too. Anyway, so early grunge phase, I listened to Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, like actually pretty good agreeable music that I would still listen to today. If I'm in a mood and everything. I wore really worn out boots, which I do not have anymore, but trust me when I tell you they were really worn out and not that good looking anymore. I probably wore skinny jeans because those were the only kinds of jeans that were being sold at the time. I wore t-shirts and this one fuzzy sweater I got from my mom because I just thought it fit the aesthetic so well. I really wanted to wear flannels, but they were kind of hard to get and also kind of expensive for however old I was. Moving on, I think this is where I entered my hipster phase. And no, I'm not talking about the cool 2014 galaxy print, neon hair, mustaches, Tumblr and We Hearted sort of hipster. No, I am talking about the checkered button-up, nerd glasses wearing, Vans hating because Toms were absolutely superior, indie band death cap for a cutie loving kind of hipster. So I was like completely lame. Like indie college boy with a misplaced sense of superiority kind of lame. Dan Humphrey ? Kind of lame. Anyway, it is totally fine if you're into all these things, but what distinguishes the hipster from your average indie-loving, likable person is this ever-present sense of superiority. No, Toms are better. No, indie music is better. No, my style and my taste are better. And I have to admit, it took me a long time to eradicate this feeling of taste superiority, and there's still times where I'm inclined to call someone basic for no valid reason whatsoever, which is something I'm working on. But the point is that this phase was definitely the wellspring of this mindset. So I thought to myself, well, since this hipster thing isn't really working out for me, why don't I dabble into hippie style? So here I went into a very, very short-lived phase of bohemian-inspired style, and the only good thing about this phase really was that I discovered the Beatles and that I liked the Beatles. Though I don't actually listen to the Beatles anymore, sue me, but I guess it's good I did it once in my life, right? Right. Anyway, so this is where things get quite messy. or even messier if you will, because I wasn't quite happy with hipster or hippie me, and I wanted to return to my quote-unquote authentic self. So I returned to not the emo phase, no. I'd grown out of that. I was 12 or 13, gosh. No, it was time for something much more refined and much more sophisticated. I became goth. Or at least, I tried. Again, I wasn't really goth. I wasn't out here listening to The Cure or Susie and the Banshees, which I still can't pronounce to this day, and I'm so sorry. No, I was just wearing full black, studded or chain chokers and cross necklaces and probably listening to Evanescence or Nightwish. Yeah. I even remember trying to listen to Muse, but it just not really being my thing. Questionable music taste aside, I did really appreciate and enjoy gothic fashion. I loved the Victorian inspirations, and I loved how dark it was because I myself had turned kind of dark inside, I guess, as well. I was struggling with depression and coming to terms with the facts of growing up and, just realizing things and realizing life isn't gonna be easy and that you won't have things figured out by 15 or 20, 30, 40, or 50, because clearly the adults around me didn't have it figured out either, and it was quite hard to accept and come to terms with. Anyway, I'm saving this philosophical monologue for later because we have something quite exciting to get into, which is my discovery of Japanese substyles. So, from Gothic, I dabbled into Gothic Lolita, or a really sad attempt at Gothic Lolita, because I really, again, did not have the money to buy actual Gothic Lolita. Anyway, so standouts were probably Sweet Lolita, Fairy Key, Pastel Goth, and a short interest in Classic Lolita, which then transferred into another interest, namely vintage and classic fashion. So I know we're moving quite quickly now, I guess there's just a lot of ground to cover, but at the age of 13 to 14, I developed an interest in 1950s and 1960s fashion, and my biggest inspiration was Audrey Hepburn. At the same time, I became the biggest Ariana Grande fan ever, and I was heavily inspired by her personal style at the time, as well as the style of her character Kat. It may also be worth noting that between the goth phase and now, I'd completely switched from being this sort of metalhead, like very sort of, to being a complete pop head. I remember listening to Star Stands, Yours Truly, Bangers, Electra Heart, and Born to Die on repeat, and it was absolutely iconic. So, here rolls around January 29th, 2015, and Square Enix releases this little game called Life is Strange, and this was a cultural reset, at least for me. To this day, I keep saying that this game changed my life, and I truly feel like it did, though I can't really explain how. I just connected with the story and the characters, and I was so intrigued and moved, and I remember being so excited for, it's monthly, I think, releases of new episodes. It was honestly the one thing I always looked forward to during a time I truly didn't feel like I had much else to look forward to. Importantly for this video, however, I adapted to the style. I started listening to indie folk and actually being the kind of indie-loving, lovable person I mentioned earlier, in contrast to the pretentious hipster. But yeah, life was strange, and I'm so sorry for that pun. I know it's horrible. But in all seriousness, life was complicated, and I was struggling a lot with everything. School, friends, my parents, myself, it's the usual teenage troubles really, but, just because they're usual doesn't make them any less valid. So, this is a sort of transition moment in my life, because I switched schools, and this again was a cultural reset for me. No, it really was. I feel like I changed a lot during this time, both for the good and for the bad. I learned calmness in a sense. I gained a sort of serenity in my life, because my life at my old school was definitely quite problematic and chaotic for me, so that was a nice change. But at the same time, it wasn't just calmness, it was numbness that I gained. In my previous years, I struggled, right? I struggled with coming to terms with things. I struggled with certain realizations. I struggled with processing my parents' divorce, and I struggled with the experience of new emotions and new desires, wanting to be wanted, wanting to be loved, wanting to be liked, wanting to be accepted. I wanted a high school dream, and I didn't want to be an outcast. Even though, in hindsight, looking back at how I was and looking back at me, I mean, first of all, I was a complete outcast, but it also honestly looked as if I was making myself a complete outcast. Because, what's rational about a 14-year-old's behavior? Anyway, so I was struggling, and I was actively fighting this new sadness that dawned upon me and that sprouted out of feeling rejected and confused. While my parents were also getting divorced, and this happy life as I knew it before I went to high school was falling apart right before my eyes. But I guess by 2014 to 15, I'd kind of accepted it. I'd let that sadness in and make itself at home. It wasn't a nuisance anymore, just turned down to soft static until it became comforting and defining. It defined who I was, how I acted, how I spoke. I became defensive and self-deprecating and generally just sincerely unhappy, but I wasn't really mad about it anymore. I just accepted that that was how I was, and that was who I was gonna be. That no matter the amount of characters I could come up with and turn myself into, I would always be the sad thing that nobody wanted and nobody could love. I told you it gets pretty angsty. So, I know it's hard to come back from this, but we gotta, right? Because the story doesn't end like this. So please, just like I tell myself at this point in my life, don't give up on me. Stay, and you'll see. Alright? Alright, let's get it. Okay, so my style evolution had started reflecting this numbness, and my creative quest of self-discovery became kind of toned down, meaning I get pretty tame from here on out. At the resurrection of the grunge phase, now mixed with alternative pop and metal, meaning I listen to Nirvana, Issues, All Time Low, Marina the Diamonds, Panic at the Disco, just those artists everybody stanned at the time, and it was absolutely iconic. So anyway, I had a 90s phase too, which I totally did before it was cool. I was really inspired by the movie Clueless and Mean Girls, even though that is technically early 2000s, but whatever. I mean, as you've noticed, I never cared about chronology anyway, right? So, moving on, I had an all-black phase, I had a pretty long preppy phase, and then I had this super duper pink phase where I just wanted everything to be pink and cute, and I guess part of me still does. So we're nearing the end here, and I know I pretty much rushed through these last few years. But I have to admit that although the years of 2011 to 2015 are a bittersweet memory for me personally, they were some of the most exciting years creatively and style-wise. I guess you could say that my style seemed like a distant blank canvas that's gradually getting splattered with more and more colors, and that these first 4 to 5 years, in a sense, were the most exciting part of that project. Lastly, I wanted to emphasize that my main goal throughout all of these years was to find myself, to find who I really was, like a quest for this one specific style that I 100% identified with and would pursue for the rest of my life. And at the same time, I was establishing these characters to hide behind. I aspired to embody these personas so I didn't have to be the person I actually was, because I really didn't like that person. But 9 years down the line, I've come to realize that all these characters are part of me and that they all add up to my chaotic and collective being. And I spent most of my life rejecting that idea. Close friends of mine will know that I struggled with finding this singular and linear sense of self, and that it wasn't until recently that I could accept that I was not a singular, linear character. And more importantly, I didn't have to be in order to be happy. In fact, I hadn't ever been as happy as when I accepted that all these characters I created throughout my life were all part of me, and I finally just felt whole. So, from 2019 to now, I guess I've finally come to terms with some of the difficulties and nuances of life and with myself. Though, rest assured, I surely don't have everything figured out yet. But I'm happier than I've ever been. And for the first time in a really, really long time, I'm actually excited about life and what's to come. So, as a closing statement, when I was 14 to 15, I accepted sadness into my life. And now that I'm turning 20, I'm finally accepting happiness too. And there you have it, a virtual celebration of the past 9 years, of who I was, who I've become, and a virtual toast to the next 10 years and all the things I may and hope to learn.